first seminar. We have freshwater seminar on fish finding interpretation. That's Collin Edwards in the back of the building in about 15 minutes.
I've done a couple seminars at other boat shows. Just wanted to kind of go over fish finding, kind of more of the back end. A little bit of that, how to choose a transducer, how to choose frequencies on your fish finder. Does anybody know what brand of fish finders they have currently? Lowrance, okay. So for Lowrance, I actually run 2 of those myself. This will be very similar to what you have on the screen. So on your settings on the Lowrance itself, once you have the transducer plugged in, you have 2 different frequencies, and a little bit about those 2. There are 2 different frequencies on that fish finder. You have 83 kilohertz and 200 kilohertz. That's just a frequency to show clarity and better target separation, and I'll get into that here shortly. Question? Garmin? Okay. So you'll have to check with your manufacturers, and that's why I'm asking. Certain manufacturers have different transducers that come in the box. You can also buy aftermarket transducers through Airmar. That's what I run myself. I run an Airmar 185 high Y, and I'll get into what that means here in 1 second. So you have 2 different frequencies. Okay, so fish finders, they send out 2 different cones. You have a different cone here, you have a different cone here. So this is your coverage on 200 kilohertz, and this is a coverage right here for 83 kilohertz. So what you can do to benefit from those 2 frequencies is if you're fishing over a specific target. Let's say you're fishing over a brush pile, a ledge, something that you actually want to fish over, rocks, for instance, structure. One way to find the structure itself is to use a wider cone, and in this case would be a lower frequency. What that does is it gives you more coverage. So whenever you're driving over that location or you're trying to get near it, if you graph it, anything that's inside of this circle will show up on your fish finder. Okay? And I'll show that here shortly, what that looks like on a fish finder itself. But if you locate that brush pile or rock or piece of structure in your lower frequency of 83 kilohertz, it gives you that bigger coverage, which is good to help you find it. But if you're fishing, you can drop your lure over in this area and it shows up on your screen, and your lure shows up on your screen because it's still in your cone. Well, look how far you are from the actual structure itself. Well, structure, some species, catfish, largemouth, other species like that are going to hang around structure. So in this case, kind of not fishing where the fish are. So what you can do is flip to your higher frequency, go to your settings, go to your sonar, click frequency, go to a higher frequency, which is 200 kilohertz. And if you're over that piece of structure with 83 kilohertz, once you switch to this, if you don't see that anymore on your screen, that's because it's no longer in your cone. So what you can do there is after you've dropped a waypoint from marking this, you can go to the side of your waypoint, and once you pick up that waypoint, once you get near that waypoint and you get near the structure and it shows up in your 200 kilohertz cone, you're a lot closer to that piece of structure. So that's kind of a benefit of using and utilizing different cones, different frequencies within your fish finding transducer that you have on your fish finder. That's a little bit of a back end on that. A lot of people don't really think about those things of why are there 2 different frequencies, what are the differences. That can be an advantage that you have with having 2 different frequencies. Now there's other frequencies that might show up like high chirp, low chirp, medium chirp. I'm not going to get into those today. It's a little bit different. Just sends down multiple frequencies itself. My next slide will kind of depict exactly what I was just talking about. You have 2 different cones here. You have the wider cone, the narrower cone, and you can kind of barely see it. I understand we're not the best on visibility, but you have these little dots down here. Those are fish. So you can see anything that shows up in this cone will come up on your fish finder, and anything that shows up in this cone will also show up on your fish finder. Again, two different cones to be closer to the fish when you drop your line. So it'll be sonar, traditional sonar will be the type, yes. And these are going to be some screenshots. That's kind of a back end of what you can expect from different cone angles, different frequencies on your fish finder itself. Now I'm going to kind of get into how to interpret that, what you're looking at. A lot of my trips, I'm actually a full-time guide here on Lake Conroe, which is about an hour north of here. Target hybrid striped bass, white bass in the spring, catfish are year-round for us. But I'm a big advocate on I don't stop to fish unless I see fish or at least bait. So I'm going to kind of get into what those things look like. I'm driving on my boat a lot of times. I have somebody looking over my shoulder, looking at my fish finder. Hey, there's a bunch of fish here. Not necessarily. And I had to say, oh, that's bait, or that's prop wash, or debris, or smaller things that I'm really not interested into. Okay. So I'm going to get into a couple things here. I'm going to try to zoom in. So we have the fish finder. This is our screen here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And these like clouds. They almost look like clouds. Bob Ross could probably call them happy clouds here. But they're very cloudy, very splotchy, and they're almost very small, very small dots. Those are going to be your bait fish. And I'll show you how to contrast those here in the next few moments. But kind of see smaller dots here. You're looking for color as well. So first off, you're looking at size of the mark. In this case, they're very small, smaller fish. As far as color, depends on the palette that you have selected on your fish finder. There's different palettes you can select to show the density. The color is the density. So something that's more dense is a larger fish. More dense will show up as a more dense color. Depending on your palette you have chosen, you can choose which colors are more dense. So on my palette, it's kind of hard to tell, but it's green. So you can see some darker shades of green here. Those are my dense colors on my fish finder. So in this aspect right here, I'm going to say this is a bait ball or a school of bait. Now you have lighter colors, which is red. You have some greens and you have some dark greens. That's going to tell you where it's thicker, where the bait is thicker. On the outskirts, right here on the outside, the thinner bait, the green and dark green is a lot thicker bait. You can actually see right here as well, the bottom of the reservoir kind of jumps up right here. Kind of goes, it's brown below, which shows the bottom of the lake. You can actually see it pop up right here. That's because there was so much bait there that the transducer actually thought it was hard bottom or bottom. So that's why you can see that jump there. There was so much bait, it was so dense, it was actually as dense as the bottom of the lake. We have a little bit more going on here. Each slide should have a little bit more intense things to show. But here we have some schools of bait. Okay, you have a little bit of a ledge here. It starts coming up a little shallower. You have bait balls that are suspended off the bottom. You can actually see there's a bait ball that's really close to bottom right here, but you can kind of see the slope of the bottom line right here. You can see the cloud of bait here. You can see it's more dense here because it's green, got a little lighter colors, but you actually have fish below the bait fish. You can see these squiggly lines. Again, the larger the mark, the larger the fish. The color also tells you the size of the fish, which is the density. You can actually see here, it's pretty cool. You can actually notice the shape of the mark. The fish went up, down, back up. And you can actually see the bait got spooked, and it's following the same contour as the fish because the fish was pushing the bait up and spooking it, which is pretty neat to see. Again, you have another fish here on bottom. And I think you have some fish over here, smaller fish. You might have some smaller baits. There's a fish there. So here you have a couple fish feeding on some bait. Here's a larger school of bait fish. This is actually a school of hybrid striped bass. Okay? This is a school of hybrid striped bass, and where I can see those is these really thick spaghetti noodle looking lines. Those are a school of hybrid striped bass. You can see each line, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can even see a 6 right there. Might be a 7th right there. So there's at least 7 fish coming through on bottom, and they're actually chasing the bait up. And again, you see the marks. You see the dense bait is up high, and you can see the fish pushing the bait up where it gets lighter and less dense here. You almost have actually a fish right here shooting through the bait. You have a mark up here, which is very similar to this. It's a real thick green mark. So these fish are shooting along the bottom. There's a fish shooting through the bait, which indicates feeding fish. Again, we have another school here. Sorry about that. Pop back into it. Again, this is a school of hybrid striped bass. Fast moving, they're going up, they're going down into the bait. Here's the bottom of the lake, here's the top. This is 20 foot, 30 foot, about 30, 37, 38 feet of water right here. You have a school of, excuse me, school of bait fish along the bottom here. You have a school of fish going down into it, which are hybrid striped bass going down to feed at lunchtime. The way you can tell they're hybrid striped bass, orientation and color. So here we have a really dense dark green color, which gives a really strong return to denser fish. They're also schooled up very, very thick. One way to tell that they're hybrid striped bass is also the change in depth. So they're kind of coming up, coming down, and more of an aggressive mark, aggressive change in depth. This next one will also be hybrid striped bass. This is, I believe, summertime. I think we're in 24 foot of water here. Summertime. So we have actually a couple things going on here. We have a couple things going on here. So we can see these really thick marks. You can see how they're not real horizontal. Catfish are going to be more horizontal, which I can show you. I'm going to show you a few of those graphs here in a second. But we have these marks that are deep changing. They're shooting up, shooting down. Another one shooting down, shooting up, shooting down. Very aggressive depth changing marks. They're kind of all over the place. And what that kind of indicates is an active, aggressive, turned on fish that's ready to eat. He's all excited. He's shooting up and down in the water column, kind of going nuts, which that indicates feeding fish. And anytime you can get those fish up in the 15 to 5 foot mark, that indicates a feeding fish. So what does a non-feeding fish look like? Again, these are hybrid striped bass. You can see some along the bottom here. Kind of see these marks, kind of see this one. It's kind of more horizontal. A lot of people say, oh, well, catfish are along the bottom, hybrid striped bass are more of an upper water column fish. Yeah, but catfish are an upper water column fish too, which I'll show you here shortly as well. What you have here is, let's say this is 22 foot of water. Anything below that 22 foot of water is what I call a fish that's sitting on the couch. He's really just kind of down there, hanging out, chilling, sitting in a chair, not really doing anything. And then once they come into this realm, which you can kind of see this mark, slowly comes down into the couch area, and then he starts coming back up. He's going back up, he's like, oh, I'm still hungry, I'm gonna go find something. So that's something to look for whenever you see these marks, see something like that. If you see a fish down below, obviously drop to it, see if you can get it to bite. But once you can get those fish off the couch, definitely more apt to bite. Again, these are hybrid striped bass, same situation. This is probably about 22, 24 foot of water. I believe this is summertime as well in Lake Conroe. You have a couple marks up here. See that depth change? He went up, straight down. These fish are more just kind of chilling. They're all grouped together. They're just swimming around, having a good time. These fish are up here in the upper water column, which this is 5 foot, right in this mark. This would probably be about 10, and that's about 20 to 22 foot. So you have these feeding fish up here. Again, drastic depth changes. These are more of those relaxed fish that aren't really ready to feed, so they might be a little bit harder to get to bite. Again, same thing, chilling fish on the bottom, extreme depth change, crazy depth change with the marks, thick marks, right color. So I'm gonna say this fish is probably a little bit bigger. It's a thicker mark. It's bigger than probably this one up here at the top. Dense green, a little bit denser of a fish. I'm gonna have to say that one's a keeper. The other ones might be throwbacks. This is a shallow water time. I think this was actually May. Again, hybrid striped bass. You can actually see this fish shooting straight up to the top. See this fish kind of coming back down. A lot of fish in this school bunched up together, but they're separated. Now, I did show you this picture earlier. I'm going to actually backtrack to that. It's actually a good point. Now, you have these fish right here, which they are up shallow. They are up high in the water column. They're up above the bait. They're going into the bait, which shows that they're feeding. But if you can see these fish like this and they're closer together, that means they're more in a cruising mode than a feeding mode, which is more of a cold water situation. But once you can get those fish to separate like this, see all these marks separated real far apart. That means they're excited, ready to feed. All right, a little bit more going on here. I'd like to go over this as well. Again, hybrid striped bass. This is a deep water situation. We were probably fishing 38, 40 foot of water here. This was actually wintertime. This has kind of been our pattern lately. We've been fishing anywhere from 36 to about 42 foot of water, hybrid striped bass. Again, fish sitting on the couch, and then these fish excited up here in the feeding zone. Now we have a few other things going on here. We've noticed that these fish are coming up to a certain depth to feed. So we have actually this horizontal line right here. We have this horizontal line there and this horizontal line there. Anybody have a guess what those are? Those horizontal lines? No? Those are actually lures. Those are our lures. In this case, they're actually our baits. So I'm a live bait fisherman. Believe heavily in that. I do fish artificial baits in other times of year, springtime, early summer, but wintertime, most of the time, I'm fishing live baits. I'm fishing shad, gizzard shad, threadfin shad. Again, those baits and those bait balls that I was showing you earlier. I throw a cast net, I catch those baits. So, what we have here, if those are baits, these are fish coming up to look at our baits. So a lot of people bring up live scope and how that has changed the game, which is amazing. It's great. It shows a lot of detail. I can see a lot of similarities with just regular sonar. There is a benefit to the forward scan and live scope to help you scan and look in a certain direction. The only downfall with this is it's only in one area of the boat where your transducer is. So if you have your bait close enough to it in that cone, you'll be able to see your bait. And in this case, we have 3 separate baits here, okay? Actually, I'm sorry, we have 2 separate baits, okay? We have this bait right here, and then we actually have this one and this one. This is actually the weight, and this is the live bait. So I use a Carolina rig. I have a weight, about 3 foot of leader, and that's the bait. So this fish came up and looked at the bait. This one started to come up and look at it. This one looked at the bait once, went away, came and looked at it again, went down, and came up and looked at it again, which is kind of cool. So at that point, you can kind of tell, I tell a lot of my customers, I'm like, hey, get ready, there's a fish looking at your bait. I'm like, how do you see that? This is how I can see that. See that fish shooting straight up. This one actually came up from here. This is where I picked him up in my cone, right? Picked him up right here. He shot up, then he shot straight up and looked at that bait. Well, guess what? He went straight back down the bottom. This one went down the bottom. We didn't catch him. That's where it's a little frustrating. You see that fish come up and look at your bait, and all of a sudden you don't catch him. You get a little exhausted whenever you see that. Again, same thing here. Look at that school of fish. Each mark is one fish. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have 5 fish that came up and looked at that bait right there. Pretty cool. Then you have this school of fish down here at the bottom sitting, which the reason I picked this photo is you can actually see this school of fish down here. 1, 2, 3 marks, can see a couple down here, but look at this mark right here. He's going on, he's sitting on the couch down there, relaxing, chilling. Whoop, shot straight up to look at the bait. Pretty neat to see. All right, this is a shallow water, more of a springtime, early summer. Springtime, 57-degree water temp. Wintertime, it's anywhere from 49 to 52, 53 degrees. This is a little bit warmer, it's 57 degrees. You have a school of fish here. Again, hybrid striped bass, jagged marks. Look at this depth change. Go straight up, straight down, straight up again, and straight back down. A little bit more of an aggressive depth change mark, hybrid striped bass. That's kind of be the call on that one. Again, schooling fish as well. Color and that thickness really shows, again, the species on that one. Now this is a school of white bass. Now, white bass and hybrid striped bass, very similar fish. Hybrid striped bass is actually a crossbreed between white bass and striped bass. Very, very similar fish. The only way you can tell it's different is smaller marks, a little bit smaller marks, not as thick, deep green color, but at the same time, these could be smaller hybrid striped bass. So it could either be one or the other. They're going to be in this size range. So it depends on where you are and the type of water. Will tell you what kind of species that is, either those two. This is actually a pretty cool shot. This is why I chose this. So this is one of the screenshots we took, schooling hybrid striped bass. We did get this fish to bite right here. So you have a school of fish. You actually have one of our baits along the bottom here, probably the weight right here, and you have a bait down below. Well, you can see there's a mark that shoots right here. Then you have a mark that shoots straight up, this little bitty mark that keeps going, and then you see this thick mark, which is the fish, come off of the hook, and then go back to down the bottom. That was the sign of defeat. We lost the fish. Thought it was kind of cool because you can see the customer still reeling the fish up, or sorry, reeling the fish up, reeling the bait up. The fish came off at this point and swam back down the bottom. Pretty neat to see. Just something different. This will be a hybrid striped bass as well. Thick mark. That's the same photo. Okay. So something that I wanted to get into here. Excuse me. So what we talked about earlier, cone angle. So you have the down scan sonar is what we just went over. That's your cone that goes straight down. Now there's something else that goes also in the industry as well, side scan. Okay, there's side scan. Lowrance has it on their 3-in-1 transducer. Garmin will probably have it too. It's a long transducer typically. So side scan, I get a lot of customers that ask me, hey, how do you read the side scan? We're gonna go over a little bit of that today. So first off, again, we have our regular cone here, which gives you coverage. Side scan works in shooting a cone straight out the side, which is why it's called side scan. So it's kind of a little image to kind of depict kind of what you're shooting out and where the mark will be in relativity to your boat. So this was a screenshot from side scan. This was, top of my screen is here, so this was shot out to the left. So if you have your screen, you have a center line, which is your boat. Okay, and then you have bottom right here, you have something right here, which all this is going to be the dark area, which is right here. Okay, this is going to be the left side of the boat, this will be your right side of the boat. Again, the cone is shot out of the side of the transducer. Well, anything that shows up here will kind of be along this line right here. So if you're looking out the left side of the boat, you look at your side scan, you're almost going to have to go like this and turn your head, and that's the bottom, and this is towards the boat. And again, right side, you're going to turn your head that way. So with this being said, this right here is right in this region. So what we have here is a bait ball. It's actually I also chose it because it's kind of shaped like a heart for Valentine's Day, which I thought that was kind of cute. Okay, but something really cool here, you have all these little dots. All of those little dots, I'm trying to zoom in a little bit more. So all those little dots are bait fish. So that's a school of bait. But you can see this bigger dot right here in the middle, that's a predator fish. That's largemouth bass, could be a hybrid striped bass, something like, could be a catfish, something like that. But if you also notice, where that big mark is a big hole. That's because he's swimming through a school of fish and the school of bait's being spooked. It's kind of neat to see. All right, so this is something I'm going to play with you guys. We're going to play a little bit of a game. I did this on my first date with her. It's called What Is on the Screen? So, can anybody guess what's on the screen right here? What does that look like? Anybody want to guess? Huh? No. Right here. See this shape right here? What is that shape like? Jingle bells, jingle bells. Christmas tree. Christmas tree. So that's actually a sunken Christmas tree. Right? There's also another one right here. So that's a Christmas tree that somebody sank that hadn't just sunk all the way to the bottom yet. There's actually two there. Okay? We're going to go to the next one. Anybody know what that is? I think I heard it. Ski boat. Yeah, sunken boat. So this is a ski boat. It's a sunken boat. I'm going to say it's a ski boat because you have the bow of the boat here. You have the side of the boat here. You got the transom of the boat there, which there's no outboard motor, which tells me it's an inboard outboard or an inboard. And it kind of looks like there's two little squares right here. So I'm going to call those like ski boat windows. That's what I'm going to call that. Okay, let's see what the next one is. That one's a little hard to see. That one's kind of hard to see. It's a canoe. It's a canoe. It's got the stern or the point right here, kind of points right here, then it kind of goes back. That's a little tough to see on the screen. See if we can. Oh yeah, this is a cool one. Okay, so this one, a little bit hard to interpret, but at least from the projector, this is actually located near Ayers Island, which is called Party Island on Lake Conroe. It's one of the original train truss bridges. So it's an old train truss bridge that used to cross over the San Jacinto River. So you can kind of see, this is the one side of it, this is the other side. So you can see it come up, and then it kind of goes at an angle, and then it goes straight. You can see every cross beam in between. There's a cross beam right there, and it kind of continues, and then you have your railroad bed right there, which is the continuation of the bridge. It's kind of neat to see. If you ever get a chance, it's on the northwest side of the island. If you ever get a chance to see that, pretty close to that. So we have a down image right here. It's an old tree. So you have the main stem of the tree here, and you have every single little branch. Now you have a little dot right here, which is going to tell you, hey, there's a fish there sitting in the tree. Probably maybe a crappie or largemouth. Largemouth are going to kind of be closer to the bottom down here. Just wanted to kind of show you the interpretation on that. There's another tree right here. So this is your side scan. So we talked about the middle line, which is your boat. This is your middle line on your boat. This is to the left. Here's the bottom. This is to the right. Here's the bottom. And right off the bottom, you have that tree that comes out, and you can kind of see every little individual branch of the tree, which is right there. Okay. Might be a little hard to see on that one. It's too hard to see. Okay. So here is actually a down scan, which is very similar to Sonar. It's structure scan, down scan. So you have this 20, 25, 30, 35 feet. You have the sloping bottom that comes down, and you have this tree stem that comes up. You can see every little individual branch, but you can see these little dots here, 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 here. Those are fish. You have these dots which are along the bottom, which are going to tell you that they're largemouth bass. Largemouth bass are going to be more of a horizontal orientation on this side, this type of sonar, down scan, sonar, down scan, and side scan, down scan. They're going to be more along the bottom. They're going to be more of a horizontal. You do have a couple marks here, which those could be more of this horizontal, which is going to tell me they're probably largemouth bass. They could be crappies. Crappies are going to be more stacked, real vertically. They're going to kind of stack on each other. Largemouth bass are going to kind of be on top of each other, but they're going to be more horizontal of an orientation. So school of fish there, I'm going to say, hey, those are probably, you know, they could be crappies because you could have the school. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you've got a couple up here. But those are a little too far, maybe to be the crappies. They could be. Either one. Drop a minnow down there and figure out what they're at, what they are, right? I believe that's all of our slides. Any questions that you have, feel free to ask. Other than that, I think that's all we have on fish finding. Hope you learned a little bit. It's kind of the best way to go out there, try to learn your electronics, figure out what your palettes are, dial in the frequencies and all the settings that you have. But hopefully you learned a little bit about frequencies, how to use those to your advantage, cone angles, how you can get over a specific piece of structure and get closer to that piece of structure. So, awesome. Well, thank you for your time. Hope you learned a little bit of something. Enjoy the fishing show. Thank you.